Okay, well, it's really a pleasure to be here today, and I look forward to spending a lot of time with you. Basically, what I'm going to do today is very similar to the way that I teach my classes with the blogs and the wikis. And what I normally do is assign the students my recorded lectures, so you can kind of consider this to be the recorded lecture, although you're certainly welcome to ask me questions. And then in the afternoon, we'll do workshops where we can reconsolidate all a lot of the stuff that we're going to see in this presentation here. Okay, let's get this started. All right, so I looked at the blog where many of you have actually put up your own experiences with the web and education, and I see that there's a great variance into what you know. Some of you are in WebCT, some of you are very familiar with blogs and wikis, and most of you aren't. But basically, as we go through this, I'm hoping that you'll be able to see things in a slightly different angle if you do currently use these technologies. And I would really like it if you shared with me some of your experiences as we go through this. So again, feel free to interrupt me, and if I can learn something from this, I would also be very happy. Okay, so the first thing, as Beth pointed out, there are a few terms that we're going to be using. So if you're not familiar with these terms, it could sound like jargon, but actually these terms are very useful to be able to talk about what we're able to do with technology and education. The terms that we're going to come across are terms like podcasting, screencasting, vodcasting, RSS. How many of you are familiar with the term RSS? Okay, so about a quarter maybe. So you're definitely going to know what that is by the time we're done here. Atom, of course, blogs, wikis, and then a few services like Bloglines, Blogger, and FeedBurner, and a few others. What I'd like you to do as I go through this, and I'm going to be repeating these concepts in different ways. At one point, I'm actually going to give you formal definitions, but I don't think definitions are a really good way to learn things. Usually, if you see examples, that's actually better. But I will give you some definitions of these things. And as you learn what these things can do, what I'd like you to do is to jot down things that you think are interesting and true. Like, for example, this symbol right here. How many of you have seen this? Okay, maybe a third of you. So you will learn that that means an RSS feed. So if you can list some things that are true, other things such as wikis are addictive are fine. If it's something that's more objective, that would be great. Because the reason for this is that if you're going to come to the games workshop in the afternoon, I'll show you how to take those comments and we'll turn them into a game that after we're all done, everyone will have access to, and we'll be able to teach other people a lot of this technology. And the game is a game because you know what's true from what's false. So if you can come up with things that are false that are not that intuitive. For example, a lot of people think that podcasting requires an iPod. And I wanted to dispel that myth because actually, that has nothing to do with the iPod. You can use the iPod, but actually most people don't. So things like that you're surprised by, put them in there as false statements. Okay. All right, so let me give you a framework for all the things that I'm going to be talking about. I use a wiki-centric open courseware model. So that's the first thing, is that I'm big into open courseware. I'm big into being able to share my class with anybody in the world who actually wants to have access to it. And so a lot of the things that we'll be talking about are not meant for, controlling. I will give you a few ways that you can password protect your things, but in general, I will be giving you solutions where you can share your stuff openly. And generally, that's called open courseware. And a wiki is actually a great way to do that, and I'll show that to you. And the reason it's called wiki-centric is that the wiki is really the starting place for where the students go. And that's a little different than normally if you're using a course management system, a CMS like WebCT or Blackboard. Generally, the students will start at that position, and then you'll have all of your content there. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just that those systems are designed to keep people out, so they're not great for open courseware. Whereas if you use something like a wiki and blogs, these tend to get indexed very quickly with search engines such as Google, so people can actually find your stuff. And I'll show you how you can tell how people have actually found your websites and your class information. So just to orient you here a little bit, we have three components, not just in online education, but in education in general, I think. If you're going to be teaching someone something, you need to have content, right? You have to have something to say. And that can be either, usually it'll be text, images. If it's a live presentation like this, our content right now is live. It can be games. I'll show that to you at the very end. And of course, there's the workshop. And it can also be multimedia, which I'll be spending a little bit more time on. And in multimedia, I'll be particularly focusing on lecture recording and then delivering that content through podcasts and vodcasts. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to have. The second thing is you need to be able to interact with your students. I'm interacting with you by speaking to you in real time, but if you're 100% online, you can't do that, obviously. So, email is one mode of communication. We'll see how you can use a blog to communicate with your students, and then we'll have workshops. So what I'm doing here is very different from what I'll be doing with you in the workshop, because right now I really have very little feedback as to what you understand, and even if I did, not all of you are at the same level. So it's very difficult for me to be able to give you a customized experience. So that's one of the advantages of the workshop, and why I no longer give lectures. I assign my recorded lectures, and I do workshops with students, so I can spend as much time as I can one-on-one working with each one. So yes.
How is this different from WebCT?
The question is, how is this different from WebCT? Well, first of all, the wiki is open. It's indexed in Google, so anyone can access it. WebCT, you need to have a username and password to get in. Another useful thing about the wiki is your students can actually update your course content for you if you want to. In a wiki, you can set it up so that anyone can modify. In fact, that's the default setting. Anyone in the world can modify your page. And I'll show you why that's actually not dangerous. It turns out that if somebody does come in and does something that you don't want them to, you can revert to a prior version of the wiki. So it's really not that big of a deal. And that's why wikis tend to work, because there's more good people than bad people that have the patience to keep, destroying what you're trying to create. And I frankly never had anyone actually, do anything, nefarious to my wiki. So, okay, so that's the interaction part. The third part is the assessment. In order to know that I have taught something, I have to be able to assess it, all right? And typically we do this using tests. Assessment, though, can also mean surveys. And WebCT has a great survey tool that I've actually used as I was developing the recorded lecture format. I could do that, and then right after I could give my students a survey, and they could give me feedback as to what they liked, what they didn't like. So it's not that I'm saying don't use a course management system, but what I find it to be good for is mainly assessment, because there you in fact have the security. You can validate that it is that student coming in, and there are various ways that you can do that. And the other thing with assessment is they don't all have to count. One of the things that I use in WebCT is quizzes on chapters that I don't actually grade. The students can come in and they can keep taking it over and over again, and it doesn't actually matter. In fact, on my evaluation, students said, well, I wish you would force me to take the quizzes by, having it worth something, 5 to 10%. And I did that, and it did not affect the number of students who did the quizzes. It just caused me a big headache to go through 150 quizzes, one per chapter. So, having quizzes that don't count is a really useful way to help your students assess themselves. Okay, so another way to look at e-learning is not just that we have these three components, but that there's more than one way that you can connect them together. I just talked to you about using a course management system like WebCT or Blackboard, and that's your default probably now at most of your institutions, where you will, for example, use the discussion feature in WebCT, for example. We already talked about using the quizzes to test. And you can deliver your content there, right? You can put content directly inside of WebCT so that your students can access it, but nobody else can. So that's great if you want to have a closed environment. But we'll see that you can also have, as a platform, blogs or wikis. And you can also have as a platform games. So throughout my talk, you'll be seeing I have these little signs that talk about the platform and the channel and whether I'm using interaction, content, or assessment. So all of those are pretty redundant. Okay, it turns out the games are very good for some types of students, for some type of learning, and some types of teachers. I mean, that also matters. But the idea is that you give students the ability to choose the channel that they want to use to learn. Okay, so that's why I'm using a 3D model here, which is that, I think the real power in technology is that it gives the choice to the student. Okay, so that's why you'll see those little tags. Okay, so what is this all about? I mean, if I saw some of you really don't have a clue as to what we're talking about when we talk about blogs, wikis, and all this new technology. And I was trying to think of a way to summarize really what's so different about it and why people, why Beth's excited and she's talking to people about it. It's really because it's a new way to communicate ideas, to share ideas with other people. In the model that we're all used to, you have somebody who wants to send you information, and they will use, for example, email or the phone, and they will push that onto you. And you have little choice in taking it. Now you can decide what to do. You can create filters, and for example, have your spam. Try to figure out if something is spam or not. But still, you have to do the work for that, and it's not perfect. Okay, you have to do a lot of work. And the phone, I still get calls 5 or 6 times a day from telemarketers on my cell phone, and I've called the phone company up to see if they can block that number, and they tell me they can't on a cell phone. That's ridiculous. I mean, that makes it very unpleasant for people to use these types of technologies. So this works if the sender and the receiver are on the same page, right? If they are looking for the same thing, if they're trying to achieve the same thing. But it does have the problem that people can spam you. They can force you to take in information you don't want. So that's a push model. The new model that I'm going to be discussing is more of a pull model, where the receiver is going out and subscribing to sources of information. And those sources of information, a typical one is a blog. If I have a blog, the only way that you're going to actually read it is if you subscribe to it. You have to make the effort once to subscribe to it. And if you ever don't want my information, you unsubscribe to me, and there's no way for me to force you to take it. All right, so basically, this is a very different model, and a podcast is exactly the same thing. It's the same model. Wikis, there is a way to use wikis, especially the ones that I'll be showing you, wiki spaces, where you can create a feed. And like we updated the wiki this morning. If you were subscribed to that, you would have gotten an alert that said, there's new information, and then this is what the new information is. But again, you have to make an effort to pull the information. Okay, now this whole pull concept is based on this technology called RSS. And what that stands for, there's a few things that it stands for. Most of the time people say that it means really simple syndication. And you have the concept here with the syndication of the subscription model, where you have to subscribe to an information source. And again, just to reiterate, it puts the receiver, not the sender, in control. Of course, you have to have a sender to create the feed, to create the information source, but that will not do anything unless you are looking for that information. And there are lots of ways that you can actually find that. If you know that you want the information from my blog, for example, and you know my blog address, you can go and look for it specifically. But let's say that you get really interested in, I don't know, even RSS, for example. You don't just want to know what I have to say about it. You want to know what anyone has to say about it. What you can do is use, for example, MSN. There is an RSS feature in it where you can search for RSS and then click on a button and it'll create a feed for you, so that if RSS shows up anywhere in a blog or on a web page, you will know about it. Okay, so those are the things that I can show you also at the workshop. So if you do come to the games workshop, If you have other things that you want to look at, I'd be very happy to sit down with you and show you how to do this. So write this down as we're going through the things that you'd like to learn more about. Okay, so RSS, the other thing is that it connects the right sender and the right receiver. So everybody's happy in that model. Nobody's doing things that they don't want to do. They're not getting things they don't want. And, a good way to say that is that you can't be spammed. Okay, so what does this look like? So now with this new model of sharing information, what we have are all happy people. You have people, it's really a network. If you're not I like to talk about the RSS divide, where the people who are using RSS are communicating with each other at a speed that is based on hours. Like when something happens, it propagates using RSS very, very quickly. And then the rest of the world finds out about it, and it usually takes months to go to print, or by the time a TV station knows about it. And by that time, the information is so diluted, it's kind of hard to figure out what it was originally. So it's always interesting because we really do have this divide, and it's not because people have technology and other people don't. It's a knowledge issue. It's because you don't know, first, that it's available, and secondly, how easy it is to do it. But by the end of the day, you will know, and you'll have the choice to join that. Okay, so what are the things that we are communicating? Well, in blogs and wikis, the major thing is text. And in podcasting, the major thing is audio. Okay, not always, but usually it's audio files. And when we talk about a vodcast, we are talking about video, and the video iPod was being passed around with that recording. So that was an example of a vodcast. If you subscribe to the vodcast that Beth set up yesterday, you will get that on your video iPod in the same way. And the screencast is also a video, although it's not necessarily done through RSS. And again, that'll become clear as we go through. Okay, so what does this actually look like? I took some screenshots in case I wouldn't have access to the internet, and that was almost the case, so I'm glad I did. But hopefully at the end, if we have time, I'll go through and take a look live at as to what these things look like. Basically, this is my Chem 242 class. It's an organic chemistry class, and when students are either interested about my class or are actually taking it, they will go to chem242.wikispaces.com, and the page they end up with is the starting page. And right away I tell them what this is, that this is in fact the starting place. If they forget where stuff is, this is where they need to come to. If they go into WebCT, all WebCT will do is say, here's a quiz, and go to the wiki. Okay, so this is really the place where I can link to all of the other things that are relevant to the class. I give usually one introductory lecture because a lot of the students are not familiar with the recorded lecture system. So basically the first lecture is live, and it's also recorded, and then I basically put a link to it. All right, so this would be the link. If you click on it, it would basically show you the screencast. And after that point, we have the archives, which are available in a number of formats. Okay, so just the simple stuff to get out of the way, the syllabus, the FAQ, all of those things, that's entirely as to how you want to do it. If you wanted to, for example, have your FAQ as part of your syllabus, that's very simple to do. These links are just links that you create on the fly as you see the need for it. So this is not something where I sat down and I thought, how am I going to design this wiki so that my students can learn best? I basically just, whenever I thought that I needed something, I added it, and if I got feedback that it was confusing, I changed it. And that's the power of the wiki. And theoretically, the students can come in and they can put their own notes, for example, and I'll show you how to do that. So to actually look at the classes, right, in this particular instance, I did put it through WebCT because some of this material has copyrighted stuff in it that I can't make public. So there's another way around that, but one of the things that you can always just put a link directly in WebCT to the recorded lectures. This is also available as a podcast. So if you have your video iPod, you will actually see it on your as a video, the way that it's passing around. I give links to other resources. It turns out that right now there's a tremendous amount of information that is available that's free and that's open. For organic chemistry, for example, there are a few textbooks that, we're talking about 1,200-page textbooks, that are every bit as good as the stuff that students are paying $150 for every term. And it's just completely freely available. And so if you weren't sure that was available, you know, I can try to look with you to see if in your area some of that stuff is there. But it's just amazing what's happened, especially in the past year, in terms of really, really high quality information. Okay, so you know, we've got some other stuff here that we'll look at when we go live. All right, so I'm going to revisit this concept of open courseware. I'm not necessarily trying to convince anybody that they should make their course open, but if it's something you were thinking about, you know, there are tools that I'm going to give you that you can actually use. And you might want to think about it for the following reason. I mean, a podcast is an audio recording, all right, of your lecture. So does a podcast make a sound if it lives behind a firewall? So if you have a podcast, or you know, an audio recording, or even a video recording, and it's in WebCT, and the only people who ever see it are your students, and then when your class is over, no one ever sees it again, does it matter? Well, it mattered for the 50 students you had, but it doesn't matter for the student in Africa or in China who's looking for information on your class. It doesn't matter to them. So what's happening right now is that because the technology is so simple and cheap, that anyone can do it. Anyone in the world can do it. So I'm teaching organic chemistry. There's lots of teachers around the world. Any one of them can do this. And this technology is, a lot of it is completely free, right? So if anyone can do it, then someone will do it. And so my reasoning is basically either be the first or be forgotten. So after you finish your career, that's nice. You have all these recorded lectures, you know, that are behind a password, and nobody's going to care. But if you put them, you make them available, they're going to be on Google, and not just students. It's just amazing the people that email me. For example, the most interesting case I had was a guy who wanted to follow my lectures because his fiancée was in organic chemistry, and he wanted to spend more time with her. So he wanted to learn a little bit more about, you know, what she did. It's just fascinating to see how people are using your courses. And you can't know that unless you actually take that step. So, and this is what's happening right now. Okay, so 5 years ago, no, it wasn't the case, absolutely. But right now we're talking about high quality open courseware will be inevitable. That means that if you want to know anything, all you basically need to do is go on Google, and you will be able to, you know, have your pick. Right now in organic chemistry, we have Berkeley that has their full recorded videos, and Haverford, I think, is the other one. And as we move forward, so I'm talking here about full university recorded lectures, university level stuff. And in the high schools, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking basically for university level, but I'm sure that it's out there. Question?
Is that like the whole university or certain departments, like Berkeley and Haverford?
The question is it all the university? No, it's general. It's going to be course by course. Berkeley just happens to have a pretty good infrastructure for their video recordings. They actually do the video, but they do a good job with going to the board or going to the projection. So it's actually pretty good. The screencast, you're not going to see my face on the screencast at all. It'll just be what shows up on the screen. So that's usually, it's cheaper and easier to do that way. But no, you have to keep checking. Like if you wanted to go to Berkeley's site, they have it all listed very nicely. Some places don't have it centrally organized, like Drexel doesn't. So if you're looking for organic chemistry, you'll happen to find my recorded lecture. And if another professor is doing it, you'll just happen to find it by searching for it. So it really depends on the university. Question?
Is this like an online course then? You actually teach organic chemistry for, like, I couldn't imagine teaching chemistry high school online. I just couldn't imagine it.
The question is that she can't imagine teaching chemistry using a recorded lecture?
Yes, I mean, like, are you actually in the classroom doing this then? Or this is online period, like the kids don't even come to you?
Yeah, so currently the students can come to workshops,
Okay,
but the actual lectures are recorded.
recorded, so when they wanna get information,
Yes,
they have to go to this your website.
Right.
Right, basically, and get, are you gonna show me what a lecture?
I will show you I will show you all this stuff, and I'll give you data as to how students behave and how it affects their performance also. Yes, question.
You have to host, like they have your wiki be hosted somewhere, or how does that?
The question is how to host your wiki. The solution that I'm giving you, the reason I'm repeating the question is because the people who are going to watch the screencast will not hear the questions in the back, so I'm repeating them. The question is, are wikis hosted? It depends on the service. The one that I'm recommending, which is Wikispaces, the one that we'll be using, that one is hosted for you, which is very nice. So I think all the solutions that I'm giving you, you don't need to have a server. That's the other really exciting thing that's happening. It's not just that the software is free, but that companies are actually hosting it for you for free. Things like YouTube, you can actually put your video, they'll host it, they'll make sure that it's got, the connection is great, it's high bandwidth. It's just incredible what is available right now completely for free. And that's changing how we can teach. Now, if you wanted to run your own wiki, like you can get MediaWiki, you can install it on your own server, you will have more control. But not everybody, me included, wants to run and host my own server. It's a pain because you're responsible for it. What are you going to do if it goes down, if it gets hacked? So I trust services like Wikispaces is now owned by Google. So I trust that. That's probably not going to go down. And they have some very good backup features. You can actually export your whole wiki into a website format. And it's got all your files and everything in there. So it's safe from that standpoint. Question?
How do college and university administrators feel about this kind of thing as opposed to WebCT, where the college and the university feel that they have some kind of ownership of the course?
So the question is, how do the administrators feel? I guess some aren't too happy, and that's going to depend on your institution. It's all going to depend on your institution, right? What kind of relationships you have. And remember that I'm just suggesting one way to do it. Your institution may in fact already be hosting wikis. You have to ask. And if they are, that's great. You can go and you can use it. But what do you do if they don't host it? Like Drexel does not currently support blogs or wikis officially. So in order to do it, I would have to either create my own or host my own server, or I can use one of these solutions.
But how do they feel about you having your course on a wiki?
In my institution, it's fine. There's not a problem. In my institution, that might vary, I'm sure. Anything else? Yeah.
What was the software that you mentioned that you would have to have for the server to provide Wikispace? Is it MediaWiki, did you say?
Yeah, in order to host your own wiki, MediaWiki is a pretty popular one. I think that's the same one that Wikipedia runs on. So, okay. Question? Yep.
Where did the words wiki and blog come from? Are they acronyms for something?
Does anyone know where wiki comes from?
Hawaiian.
Yeah, it's Hawaiian. Actually, it's supposed to be wiki, right? But people just, it means fast in Hawaiian, apparently. And blog is just web log. It's a condensing of the terms. And by the way, all of these questions, the best way to answer these is to go to Wikipedia, wikipedia.org. And if you type in blog, it will tell you all that stuff and a lot more. It's a pretty good source for this kind of stuff, for finding out the origins of things.
What was the source?
Wikipedia.
Oh, Wikipedia.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm talking a lot here about OpenCourseWare, and there's a reason that a lot of people don't do it. All right, and I'm going to go through it, and you can decide if it's a factor for you. One of the issues is the time risk. Now, that's actually not specific to OpenCourseWare. That actually, you'll have exactly the same question if you're using WebCT. The issue is if you want to put part of your course online or your course completely online, how much time is this really going to take? And a lot of faculty have been scared by horror stories of, taking an entire summer to create one course. And I don't want to do that, and I think most faculty don't want to do that. So the only solutions that I'll be talking to you about are solutions that take very little time to do that have an extremely high impact. And screencasting is one of those technologies. It's something that takes about 10 minutes to learn how to do, and you don't really have to change the way that you're teaching, and it has a huge impact. And again, I'll show you data points that I'll tell you about performance and things like that. The second problem is the failure risk. What if, you get excited here today, you want to do this, you go out, what happens if you fail? What I suggest you do with these things is not to do an entire switch from one term to the next, but to take, as I'll show you in another screen here, is to take small steps where you would, for example, record. Currently, if you're teaching, you have no online component, just start recording. Don't even tell your students necessarily that you're doing it. Just start recording, take a look at it. If you're happy with it, then make it available as just an additional bonus. Okay, so you're not putting yourself in a position where if the technology fails, that you've already promised students that you're going to have this, right? That's a pretty good way to do it. So you do it term by term. You keep getting more aggressive with it until finally, if you want to, you have a fully online course. Okay, so that's how you deal with that. The other issue is the intellectual property risk. Basically, all of my courses use a Creative Commons license. They are available for use by anyone as long as they attribute it to me. So if you want to use, my course on my specific lecture on chirality, I welcome you to actually put a link to my course. You just have to tell me that you do. Now, if you don't like that idea, OpenCourseWare is probably not for you, because if you put the stuff out there and you tell people that they can't use it, they probably will anyway, and so you're just putting yourself in a situation that's not beneficial. Now, if you wanted to look at this and say, I have this great course and I'm going to, put it behind a firewall, I'm going to charge money for it, you can try to do that. Right now, the environment is really pretty hostile to that. There was a university that was charging their students $5 per podcast, and that went down really badly because podcasting is evolved from the open source people, evolved from the open source mentality, and so the idea, you can certainly do it. I mean, you can, on Google Video, you can charge for content, but the problem is that for educational, it's a little bit difficult to do that because there is an expectation that it's free. So what'll happen is that, again, if you're doing that, other teachers will be putting their stuff on there for free, and they will just be ignoring your stuff. So if you want to consider that, it really comes down to what do you value in terms of your teaching. If you think you have something to offer, there are other ways of getting rewarded for it, and that's probably not a very effective way to do it. But I don't know. Maybe somebody will make a huge amount of money selling their lectures. The other issue is the institutional recognition. Currently, if you're shooting for tenure, it's probably not the best thing to put all your eggs in this basket because it's not really widely accepted right now. I mean, if you spend a lot of your time, creating all this great open courseware, or even if it's not open, if you're just converting your lectures, unless you're actually doing chemical education, it'll probably be pretty controversial. So what is the institutional recognition? I don't know. That's going to depend on your institution, but right now there isn't a lot for this. But I think that's actually going to change, because one of the things that happens when you put your courses online like this is that you get a lot of these students that they weren't necessarily interested in Drexel, but now they happen to be listening to this course. And so if they're deciding where they want to go, or I get emails where students asking, can I just take one course? And yeah, you can. If you want to get credit for it, certainly you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to register at Drexel as a non-matriculated student, and then you can do it that way. So I really view these as being a great recruitment tool, actually, for your institution. I mean, when you go on Google and if you type biology lecture, and I'm sure there's millions of hits, and you're in the top 10 of that, that's pretty cheap advertising actually. Okay, so I think that once administrators start to see how, like, the value of that, I think that there's going to be a shift, towards how it's assessed. But right now, I wouldn't count on it. Okay, so for the approaches to OpenCourseWare, there's two major. The first one is the top-down approach, where there are systems like Merlot. I don't know how many of you have heard of that. There's all kinds of different software packages that are out there where they will actually host your course and make it open. And it's basically just it's a course management system, but it just happens to be open. And some of them have a formal peer review system. So if you have a lecture, you submit it. Merlot, I think, works with a peer review. You submit it to Merlot, and then they pass it around, and they get evaluations from trusted sources, and then eventually it ends up being on there. And it's got institutional oversight, so it has the stamp of, I think Connections, for example, Rice runs it, so it's got the Rice name that's backing it. That's not what I'm going to be showing you, because, well, there's a lot of problems with this. I mean, basically, you have to wait a long time. You have to do it exactly the way that they want you to do it. So if they're not doing screencasts, for example, like a lot of them are doing HTML, so you have to have like your course packaged in a certain way. I don't have any HTML to speak of. Mine are recordings, so it doesn't really fit like that. So if you're looking at that, there is some advantage to it in that it's probably more respectable. But if you use a bottom-up strategy, such as using blogs, wikis, podcasts, and other RSS technologies, there's nothing stopping anyone in the world from creating it and it having be indexed in Google. And if your stuff is good, people will link to it, and if they link to it, it floats up when people do a Google search. So it automatically gets assessed whether you like it or not. So those are the two ways, and as you can maybe guess, I kind of favor the bottom one because it is so quick, and because you can do it exactly the way that you want to do it. I'm sure that what I'm doing here, you won't agree with everything, and that's great, because then you can configure it to the way that you want. If you don't like the video, for example, you certainly don't have to include it. Okay. So time here. Yes?
Just what you said about Google. The more somebody goes to your blog, higher it goes, like, and when you search it.
The question is how Google determines the ranking, pretty much. Well, no one really knows, I think, exactly how they do it, but I do know that if you have a blog and you're really active and people are linking to you and you're linking to people, you float up really quickly. And I think they do look at activity a lot. I think they look at how, when was your last post, for example, and they do look at who's linking. And I can show you how to tell all of that. You can tell how people are linking to you, and it'd be very surprising. Sometimes you just see this Japanese page, and then your name shows up. It's pretty interesting how people are finding information. But yeah, the thing with Google, a lot of people are trying to fix it or to try to do things that'll promote their site. Actually, if you just do your job, you'll show up. If you just focus on what it is that you're trying to do and you're active, you will float up there. Yes.
This is just a technical question. If someone is on dial-up, how hard is it to do these things? Is a blog still more, obviously it's going to be more accessible than a podcast or a podcast? Do you have anybody in your classes who's on a dial-up connection?
That's a great question. It has to do with the dial-up. What happens when students have different bandwidth? Actually, dial-up is the reason that I got into podcasting, because I was doing screencasting of my lectures, and it was streaming real media at the time. And what happened is the student said, I can watch it easily when I'm on campus, but I have dial-up at home, and it takes forever to look at the screencast. And he said, could you please make them available? Can you just make the audio available so that I can look at the class notes and follow along? And I looked into it, and at that time, basically podcasting was starting to come up, and I looked into it and learned how to do it. And in fact, that's how it got started. So the idea that I'm going through here is I'm just giving you a whole bunch of channels. So one channel is screencasting. If you're on high-speed connection, that's great. Another channel is podcasting, and now another channel is vodcasting. So the student, if they have a video iPod, they can come on campus, sync up their video iPod, and then go home or on the beach or whatever they want to do, and they don't need the internet at all to access. So it's all about choices. It's all, depending on the technology you have. Okay, so these are the little tags I was telling you about, right? So if the platform is a blog, for example, or you want to put links to WebCT, and you're trying to communicate content, all right, one of the channels is screencasting. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to do some definitions. You can probably already guess what all these terms mean, but let's just be really specific. So screencasting, the way that I define it, is the delivery of audio and screen capture recordings via download or streaming media links. So in the term screencasting, it has in it that whatever is showing up on the screen is going to show up when the person is viewing it. But screencasting doesn't have a strong connection necessarily with downloading it or streaming. It could be either. Yes? Streaming is when you click on a video link usually, and it's not finished downloading, but it already allows you to start watching it. So that's streaming. And with streaming, you don't copy the file on your computer. Once you click away from the site, it's gone. Now, podcasting is the automatic distribution of audio files to computers or portable audio devices through a subscription system. So the key term here is automatic. People have been putting their MP3s on their websites for a long time. That's not particularly new. What makes it podcasting, and this is a real pet peeve to the people who got involved early with podcasting, is if you call a podcast just a link on a website, they get really annoyed because it really misses the point that it's through a subscription system. It's when you click on that RSS feed and you don't have to do anything else. From that point forward, whenever there's a new recording, it'll automatically get downloaded on your computer. So that's fine. That's still podcasting. You don't need an iPod to see a podcast. And if you happen to have an iPod, you can sync to it. So it will copy, like iTunes is a good podcatcher. It'll read, but the point is it's a subscription. You don't have to keep going back to the website and remembering to download it. All right, so that's really key. And vodcasting is the video analog of that. Again, automatic distribution of video files to computers or portable audio devices through a subscription system. So again, vodcasting, so the streaming would not be considered by most people a vodcast. Question?
I want to see if I have this right. If we go on the internet and watch the sites such as MSNBC, and they're showing a video of something and it has audio with it, is that screencasting?
If it's just a video?
No, if it's both.
If it has what's on the screen? I mean, I don't think that the news stations ever do any screencasting.
Well, if you click on MSNBC, you can actually see a news broadcast and hear it at the same time.
So a news broadcast, that's something that would show up on a TV, right? But it's not something that shows up on your computer screen?
No, it shows up on the computer screen too.
Well, generally a screencast would be what my computer is producing. So right now, this is the video.
Oh, so because it's not producing on the computer, but coming in from an outside source, it's not screencasting. Yeah,
the screen in the term screencasting refers to the one that's doing the recording. I mean, if I were to actually play a video and recorded it, yeah, I guess technically it would be, but normally like a news feed would not be screencasting because it's a physical video. Sometimes you have screencasts where the person that's being videotaped will show up on the corner. That's still screencasting as long as whatever's showing up on the screen. Question.
Okay, what I hear you saying is screencasting is the transmission of what's on your screen and your computer. But,
Yeah.
okay, I was under the impression that it would be like maybe any video that you could theoretically download, like news or whatever.
No, any video, I mean, vodcasting covers any video pretty much. And again, these terms, Wikipedia would be your reference, because there are a lot of subtleties in it, and people who develop them tend to get annoyed when you deviate from their definitions. But yeah.
This is more to podcasting and vodcasting, and the question about just going to like a TV station or even a radio network site source, and you can listen to an audio file of a story, or you can bring up the news story like on CNN's website that is airing currently. You bring in the term subscription here. That doesn't involve a subscription. Anybody can go there and hear an audio file or a video file. It's a one-time thing. This is more an ongoing relationship to continually get stories.
Yeah, the question is if you access an audio file once.
Educational learning materials.
Well, I mean, basically, it doesn't have to be educational. It could be anything, any kind of content. The term subscription, the way that I'm referring to it here, is basically, and you'll see that in the workshops actually. If you have iTunes, are you familiar with iTunes? If you have iTunes, that does all RSS. That does all subscription. So, like on NPR, for example, they do have podcasts. Once you're subscribed, that's it. Whenever there's a new episode, it'll automatically download on your computer. You're going to have to unsubscribe if you don't want that to happen. So it's an ongoing relationship. Exactly. All right, so let's move on here. I already talked a lot about this here, where if you're going to go from an offline model to a fully online model, the key reason that I'm recommending screencasting specifically is that currently, if you're teaching using either overheads or chalkboard, or if you're using a laptop, basically it doesn't require a great deal of change in the way that you teach, because what you'd be doing with a tablet PC is you would write on it. Okay, so that's actually really convenient. I mean, most teachers use either a chalkboard, an overhead, or something like that. So having a tablet PC, and for my college, I purchased a few tablet PCs that faculty can sign out. So that's a pretty convenient way to do it, and it's pretty cost effective. I mean, they're about the same price as a normal laptop, but they have that capability that you can write. And for something like chemistry, it's really difficult to do unless you have a tablet PC. You have to be able to draw it, and I'll be able to show that to you. The actual process of the recording, if you were watching me when I was starting this presentation, there was Camtasia, little box was there, right? And then I started recording. Now this is currently recording everything that's showing up on the screen. It's also recording my audio. And when I'm done, I'm just going to click on F10 and it'll stop the recording, and I'll save that as an AVI file. All right. And then after that point, in order to distribute it, to do something with it, the AVI is not a great format to give to people. So generally you can convert it to Flash, which will be streaming. So for your people that have slow connections, that's important. And you can do all kinds of things with that AVI file. One of the things you can do is you can chop it up into little pieces. So if your lecture is an hour, you can actually divide up, you can record it in one full stretch. Then you can chop it up, you can edit it, you can remove parts that you don't like, or whatever you want to do. You can edit the audio. There's all kinds of things you can do, and I happen to use Camtasia, although there's other tools for that. And it's also from this AVI that you can create the podcast or the vodcast. I almost always create the podcast, the audio part of this, from the AVI because I have the video and the audio. Most people who do podcasting just don't bother with the video at all. They would use a tool like Audacity to record only the audio and then convert that to an MP3. So it depends what you have available. What I'll be showing you, you've got video and audio, so you do it a little bit differently. All right, let me go through a few of these other examples. So in terms of having the platform as a blog, what does it actually look like? So I have also the stuff that I'm showing you here, I already have recordings of how to do this. So I have an 18-minute recording that takes you from nothing to creating a blogger account, creating all these little buttons, these subscription buttons, creating a feed burner account, and then actually creating a full podcast. So what you won't remember here, if you don't have time to do it, if you go to the wiki, there's a link, and you can actually go to my tutorial, and you can learn how to do that. Okay, so there are a lot of little things you need to do, but once you've done it once, it's pretty simple. But all of my blogs look like this for that reason, that I use the same kind of template. So here are links, right? If the students, for example, don't use podcasting, they don't have a subscription, for example, they can still go and download the lectures. They can come into the blog and individually download every MP3 or individually download every PDF. If they want to, they can do that. But I don't know why you'd want to do that when you can just go on iTunes and subscribe once to it. So, but they definitely have that option. Now, how do they know? Like, if you have a class blog, okay, and you have a new post, how do people know that you've actually had something new? What you need is an RSS reader, all right, or a feed reader. And the one that I recommend is Bloglines because, well, first of all, it's free. Not all of them are. Second, it's online. It's 100% online. There's no software to download. That's nice because you're not dependent on one computer. You can go into any computer and log into your Bloglines account. And it actually has some really nice features. It has good usability. One of the things that's nice is that I can put a subscribe with Bloglines button right on my blog, and the students don't have to know anything about RSS or blogs. They just have to click on that button, and it will take them through creating an account. So that's actually really useful. There are people who are saying that students are really tech savvy, and I can assure you that a lot of them are not. You really have to start with no assumptions at all, which is another reason that I do workshops, because I can spend that first week with them showing them how to do a lot of this stuff. That's really simple, but if they haven't never done it, they don't know, right? So that's one reason I like Bloglines. The way that it actually shows up is like this. These are all feeds. All right, so this Chem 241 is one of my classes, Chem 243 another one of my classes. The JCB classes is actually my FAQ. And whenever there's something new, it shows up in bold and tells you how many new items there are. So for example, JCB classes has one new item. That could be either because there's a new FAQ, or it could be that I modified an old entry, which is really convenient. Like in a normal website, if you go in and you modify something you did in the past, it's really hard to tell. But using RSS and using Bloglines and using blogs in general, if you modify anything, it'll show up as a new item. And the way they show up is like this on the right. It's basically, this is lecture 17. I usually write a very small blurb about what that particular lecture was about, and then I put the links to the MP3, the PDF, and I have it streaming here. And this little thing enclosure, this is your actual podcast. In Bloglines, it will show up as an enclosure. Bloglines is not able to read the podcast automatically. For that, you need something like iTunes. iTunes is by far the most popular podcatcher out there. So Bloglines will not download files, but iTunes will. All right, and this stuff here, I guess, Beth, you're going to do some of that. Okay, so it's actually pretty simple when you go through it. You can make your feed compatible with iTunes. Yes?
I was just, you're talking about iTunes there and the downloading. Who has that? Is that the student who's downloading and has iTunes?
The question is, who has iTunes? Yes, it's the students that have iTunes. And what you would do, there's actually a button I'll show you here. I put a button, iTunes Podcast. And again, they don't have to know anything. They just click on that button, and this is what happens. My class comes up, and there's a subscribe button. Then they just click on that button, and they're done, basically. And I think if they don't have iTunes, I think it'll actually take them to iTunes.com and will ask them to download it. So it's actually, yeah. Okay. So here are the lectures, and you'll see in iTunes, little book icons. The PDFs show up as little books. The videos show up as little TVs, and the ones that don't have icons are the MP3s, the audio. Okay, so again, podcasting, you can podcast not just MP3s, but also PDFs. Now, we were talking about password protection, and I said that I would tell you about another way to do it. So some of my material, I still unfortunately have a lot of publisher material in it, and I'm in the process of removing it. So for the stuff that I haven't removed it yet, what's nice with iTunes is that if you have a file that you put behind just a simple HTML password protection, iTunes will pop up the username and password for you. So that's pretty good actually, because that's not very difficult to do. But it does mean that you need to have a server with someone who knows how to do that, how to set up the actual password protection. And it's a little trickier to create the actual feed because when you create the FeedBurner feed, it will verify that those files exist. But if you have a password protected file, when it tries to check it, it'll say there's no file there because it doesn't know the password. So if you want to do password protection, it's a lot more difficult. Okay. All right, and so again, to clear up another misconception, for the video iPods, it uses an MP4 or an M4V format, and that can be viewed also on your computer screen. So here's an example of on iTunes, one of my lectures, and there's in iTunes in the lower left. This is usually where the video plays. If you didn't know, if you click on it, it'll pop open a window, and you can make that window larger if you want. If you try to view the files, the MP4 files, just using QuickTime, I don't think there's a way to make the screen bigger. Maybe there is, but I don't know. In iTunes, you can. The quality is not quite as good as the screencast, as the flash. Like, I don't know if you guys can see this is a little fuzzy. It's still quite readable, but it's a little bit fuzzy. What you get is pretty good, though, for the amount. For a 1 hour file, they usually come out at about 50 megs, which is quite reasonable to expect students to download. We have people that are doing vodcasting where the files are as big as 1 gig, and that's just not doable. So if you're interested in it, this actually turns out, it looks really good on the video iPod. I can show you. If you're chemistry, you want to see what does it look like when you draw the molecules, I can definitely go through that. How much time do I have left? Okay. So what does it look like when you do that experiment where you teach the class live and you also do the recording and you make that available to students? So this is an example of that where the students were free to come to class or not come to class. And this is what happens to the attendance. And this really happened all the times that I did it. The attendance drops down to about 10 to 20% by the time of the last class. And it's kind of interesting to find out why the students, like for example, why would this student, almost at the end of the term, all of a sudden drop out? Apparently, these students never even looked at the screencasts until they were sick one day or they had to miss class. And then once they saw it, they figured, why am I coming to class? Because it's the same thing. Everything that you draw on the screen is going to show up on the screencast. So that's what happens. Now these other lines, these are the RSS subscription numbers. So what happens here is, in the first couple of days of the class, students start to subscribe through RSS. So these are students using either iTunes or some podcatcher like that, or blog lines, and then it just levels out. So what this is telling me is that the students who know about RSS or who are comfortable with learning about it will either do it immediately or they will never do it through the class. That doesn't mean that they're not looking at the lectures. They still are. It's just that they're not using their iPod or they're not using a podcatcher. They're actually going in to the blog and they're clicking on the links. So this kind of information is handy. The other thing, again, if you have OpenCourseWare, is to see what people are doing with it. this is an example of, again, an organic chemistry class where I taught it once, and this was the number of subscribers, and then I taught it again with a larger class, and then I put it on iTunes, and I didn't teach it. And what happens is I got, 600 subscribers, and I wasn't even teaching the class. So this is telling you that there's actually a great demand out there for this kind of stuff, and people are going to be looking at it. And I'm limited on time right now, so I can't show you how you can tell, for example, how people are finding your lectures, but you can do that, again, using all free tools, free and hosted tools. You can also tell where they're coming from. So again, if I look at one of my classes, the students are coming from all over the world, and I'm getting emails from around the world.
Excuse me.
Yes, question.
At first I thought you said you were putting this online and doing other things in the classroom, but now what I'm seeing is you're putting this online, plus you're doing the same delivery in the classroom.
No, what I did the first time, I did an online optional where I taught the class because I had to record it at some point.
So it was only the first time that you did it both ways.
Yes, and then
Now you just do the audio online, and in the classroom you're doing.
well, it's not just audio online; it's audio and video. It's the full screencast. I do workshops.
Okay, like
So,
labs.
well, students, we do games, for example. There's about 10% of the student that actually really likes to do games, and so we do some of that. The other thing that we do is I sit down with each student one-on-one, and some students are in the back and they're actually watching the screencast with their headphones, and when they run into a problem, they come see me, or they'll do quizzes, or they'll bring their work that they did the previous night, and we'll go through it, and I can find out where they blocked.
Now, how has learning increased in your classroom doing this?
Well,
Like their final exam.
right, the performance is identical within 1% of the students that came to class versus didn't come at all to class. And that's a key point. The thing is, when you're seeing about people that are podcasting their classes, a lot of people are very concerned about attendance, and they do things to make sure that the students will be hurt if they don't come to class. Like, for example, they won't give the class notes. They'll give the audio, but they won't give the class notes. If you do that, then yeah, you're going to have a problem. But what I'm talking about is giving them absolutely everything. They have the class notes, they have the full screencast, they have absolutely everything. Okay, so there is a difference between that. I think I've only got like 1 minute left, so let me see if there's anything critical. You can also use blogs for students to do their assignments. That's been very helpful. So this is for the very, very highest level integration, where you have students actually putting stuff together, very constructivist kind of projects. Aside from that, let me see if there's anything critical here. The model that I'm talking about is very replicatable. Everything that I'm showing you here pretty much can be done for free without necessarily having to have a server. Now, I do use a server, and there are reasons for that, but if you have brief recordings, there are places where you can upload your MP3s, for example, and all of that. So this model is something that all of you can do. And if you're interested in the games, basically, I will show you how to create some of these games. So if you were jotting down some of the concepts that are true and some that are false, I will show you how you can actually create a game using the free version of Unreal Tournament. This is actually something that I use for races. I actually give away iPods for students who run through this race. And my race, of course, is organic chemistry. But your race, Beth has done one in commas, right, grammar. You can do it in anything you want, and that's what I want to do with you in the workshop this afternoon. So I think that's pretty much it for my time, and this is also all available. Question?
What's your withdrawal rate? Is it different now? Is it up, down, same?
The withdrawal?
Yeah, the withdrawal rate applies the same?
I don't generally have hordes of students withdrawing from my classes. You get a few, but no, it's the same. The withdrawal rate is the same.
Where you said we could access this information?
Yes, this actually, I've given, if you're really interested in the games, I've actually talked about that in other talks that are recorded. So I guess what I would say, because I have very little time, I guess what I would say is if you're interested in any of this or what I'm currently doing, I report everything that I'm doing in my blog. So like after this workshop, I will go and say what I learned, and I'll put up this recording and all of that stuff. So if you're interested in general in this stuff, you might want to go into my blog and read some of my past posts. I do a postmortem analysis also. Like last term, after it was all done, I'll go in and write what I found worked and what I found didn't work. So that might be useful. In the very back.
I just have a question. If, like, how does Drexel feel? In other words, if students are paying $1,000, okay, per course, and you're posting your entire course and content online that other people, you know, can access and do that for free, you know, how does the university feel about that, and how do you foresee that changing the structure of universities in the future? If this all becomes free and online, then, you know,
Yeah.
where does that go? Right.
Okay, so the question is, how do people feel? How does the university feel? How do other colleagues feel if you're making your classes, your full recordings online, and students are paying? Remember what the students are paying for. They're paying for somebody to validate that they've learned what they've learned. And think about it this way. Basically, the students that come to my workshops get a very high-level tutor, their personal tutor, as much as they want. I've had one student who's come to every single workshop, and you know, she got much more than her money's worth. And I leave that up to the student. I mean, look, not all students are going to want to do organic chemistry, and I have to be able to say that they have learned the following things so that they can take the next course, or if they're pre-med, they can, you know, do whatever. But it's really up to them if they want to take it to that next level. A lot of the things that we do in the workshops are, you know, we also talk about doing research in labs and things like that. So, students have, I haven't had that comment necessarily from students. Mostly they're happy that they have so much access to me. And it hasn't actually reduced the amount of time that I spend teaching. It's actually either the same or a little bit more, because students do make use of the workshop. So I guess I put the ball in their court and say, you know, if you don't want to use the resource, that's your issue.
What protects you in all this? Let's say that college, the university, takes public domain of this because you created this while you were there. So now it's really technically theirs. They fire you. They have your course. Those kids are going to still be getting that course online. And you're saying it's a 1% differential, so you can't even fight to say you made a difference besides making this.
All right, I'm going to make one comment about this whole issue with the free. Remember in the beginning of my talk here, I said that if anyone can do it, they will. When I started to record my organic chemistry, there were no other full screencasts. But last term, Berkeley has put their full recordings, right? And Haverford has also put it, and I predict that next term a few more will. So it's kind of irrelevant what I do in the long run, because it is available. It will be available. Organic chemistry will be available to anyone. And that's really, I think, the way you have to wrap your mind around this concept. I have students in other universities that are following my courses. The students will find the courses and they will use them. Guess that's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bradley, for the morning presentation.